Gets the fumble. Goff goes crashing into the end zone.
It is intercepted by Jalen Ramsey.
Robert Wood, touchdown.
Picked off by John Johnson.
Touchdown, Tyler Higbee. Cooper Kupp plucks it out of the air.
Henderson with a good run and a first down. Still on his feet. Touchdown, Van Jefferson. Everett in stride. Wow.
To the end zone. Cam Akers. LA will play for the Lombardi.
NFL draft season is upon us. It's possible that you might have Trevor Lawrence's haircut in your pants. That's why our partners at Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming, have partnered with us to make sure you don't gamble on shaving your balls the same way you like to gamble on football. For all of my draft geeks, we have an exclusive 20% off promo code DTR at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and make sure to use code DTR. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Hi guys, welcome back to Downtown Rams. As always, I'm your co-host Alexis Kraft, joined here with my co-host Jake Ellenbogen, and we are back after a little off-season hiatus, which is very exciting. We're excited to be back and talk about what's been going on with the Rams off-season so far, what to look forward to with the draft, and maybe even preview next season a little bit as well. But Jake, I am very excited to be back. It feels like it's been too long.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely been, in communication. It's not like we're a hiatus from ourselves, but it's been, definitely way too long. Different off season, the last 2 years we've had a ton of interviews and what have you, and this year we kind of took a step back and, just took some very needed time off, and that's pretty much that, but glad we're back.
Yeah, me too. And to start things off, because we are going to be talking about the Rams off season this episode, I think it's safe to say, Jake, that we have lost quite a bit player wise this off season. So I want to go over that really quick, and I want to talk about that with you, because I just know, browsing social media, browsing our Instagram and our Twitter and whatnot, that people are a little confused by some of the people that we've lost this offseason. Some people are very upset and some people are happy. So I'm going to go over the list really quickly of who we lost this offseason, and then we can kind of delve into each player briefly and describe our thoughts on it. So I think that the big obvious loss, Jake, that we've lost this offseason is safety John Johnson III. And he signed a deal with the Browns. And I think that this was the one that hurt the most. I know it was the one that hurt me the most, but just judging off what I've seen on social media, Jake, I think that losing John Johnson is certainly something that is kind of hitting everybody in the core a little bit.
Yeah, that was definitely one that, early on in the 2020 year, I pretty much said he won't be back. We talked about it on the show. I said there's no way he's coming back. It's not happening. And then I started to wonder if he could come back because, they made the trade and they were it seemed like they were starting to lean towards the idea of cutting some players and freeing up some cap. And sure enough, making those restructures. And at the end of the day, they had the money to bring him back, but they didn't have the money to bring him back and actually hold a draft class, if that makes sense. So when people are like, how did they not bring him back? They had $13 million in cap, what have you. You have to have a reserve of, I think it's at least $4 million in cap just to hold a draft class. And the Rams just simply wouldn't have been able to do that. So also, I think John Johnson at the end of the day just felt like his time was up. And I think he obviously wanted to be back, but when you're a player and you reach free agency for the first time in your career, and you've given your heart and soul to a team, and you are one of the top players at that position, when you see your team not really fight for you, I feel like that kind of, it sticks in your mind. And, then in free agency, you see a team that really wants you, like the Browns, and you feel wanted, and you feel like, someone understands your worth and knows your worth. It's like that, I'm going to go there. And I think that's ultimately what led to John Johnson going to the Browns, which last time the Rams played the Browns, it was 2019. And John Johnson picked off Baker Mayfield. So, I mean, they saw him up close, and not this same regime, but some of the players and some of the front office people saw John Johnson up close and personal, when they went to Cleveland.
Yeah. Yeah. And, John was obviously not just a really great player on the field, but he was someone who was really loved by fans. So that's definitely part of the hurt there, losing him. But based off everything that he said, he has all love for the Rams. It's obviously a business, and he's going somewhere that he's really excited about and that he feels is going to be a good fit for him. I mean, that Browns backfield is turning into quite the scary situation over there, and John is going to contribute, I think, right away. And what's interesting, Jake, is the next guy on our list is going to be joining John Johnson over on the Browns, and that's cornerback Troy Hill, who also signed a deal with the Browns. And I don't know about you, but this was very shocking to me because this is a guy that I felt the Rams were going to bring back and really wanted. Not to say that they didn't want to bring him back. I mean, they certainly could have offered him something, and he chose to go with the Browns for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure. But he was a guy, along with Darius Williams, that I thought for sure the Rams would push to bring back. And they obviously brought back Darius Williams, but were not able to get Troy Hill. So what are your thoughts on Troy Hill going over to the Browns as well?
Yeah, I think with that's a little different than John Johnson. I think the Rams were more inclined on bringing back Troy Hill than John Johnson, for what I was told. And they actually were a finalist for Troy Hill, which tells me that the Rams somewhere out there are still in the market for a slot corner. And Troy Hill did a fantastic job becoming that slot corner that also had the versatility to play on the boundary. And, with Troy Hill, what it came down to is this. I think he really wanted to stay with the Rams, but he had an opportunity to go back home. The Browns are, that's his home. He lives, that's where he's from, Ohio. So he had the opportunity to go back home, and, he chose home over the Rams, and I don't really blame him. I know there's a lot of people that were like, come on, this is ridiculous. You should have come back to LA. But, the fact of the matter is Troy Hill, he balled out with LA. He carved out a good career for, through his ups and downs. At the end of the day, his last game as a Ram was a playoff game that he started in Green Bay, and he was a, key contributor for the defense. So I don't feel like there's anything that he had to do or didn't do. I think, for somebody that was cut a bunch of times, New England, Cincinnati, I'm just impressed with, his development. I gave up on him early on. Didn't make that mistake again, but the development with the Rams really impressed me. It's not something I expected, and I think he's become an underrated player, or so I thought. The Browns clearly don't feel that way.
Yeah, I think he's going to do well over there as well. And like I mentioned before, I think that the Browns are building something really special in that backfield. And I think, like you said, not only is Troy going home, which is probably, one of the main influences there, but he also probably saw that. He probably saw the same thing that John Johnson saw. And, I'm sure he's excited about that. And obviously I wish both of them nothing but the best and success over in Cleveland. But the next guy, Jake, is a little hard to wish success for, other than personal success, because that's linebacker Samson Ebukam, who is going to the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I knew we were going to lose Samson. I wasn't sure where. He was just a guy that didn't necessarily fit in what we were doing anymore. He didn't do much last season with the Rams. I mean, he obviously throughout his time with the Rams made some really great plays, particularly in our Super Bowl appearance. But he just kind of fell off a little bit. He kind of got lost in the mix with the Rams. It didn't seem like the Rams were interested at all in keeping him. And he chose to stay in the division. He chose to go to San Francisco, which is honestly an interesting choice to me. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to plan to use him. I do know 49ers fans who are friends of mine, and they were a little bit surprised by this as well. And they were asking me about him and where he's going to play. And I obviously said, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how San Francisco is going to use him, but he obviously saw something there. He signed a 2-year deal in San Francisco. But what are your thoughts on him going?
Well,
there?
I mean, he really didn't fit the 3-4. I said for years, I think he's more of an inside linebacker that's been playing out of position. Because I think his athleticism just doesn't come. Well, apparently, if you look at, all these pro days this year, it seems like athleticism is growing on trees now. But normally, the athleticism he has is rare. And so I saw the 49ers paying a guy that maybe they could, move inside and be kind of a situational pass rusher, but maybe even develop as a linebacker, for that defense. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. I wanted Samson Ebukam to get a shot inside. Felt like as an inside linebacker, he would have offered better value. His biggest problem, the guy doesn't have a pass rush plan. And you see it, first thing on film is that there's no plan. There's, he's going to try to beat his man with his speed off the edge. He doesn't have the best bend, so that doesn't work. And then he'll try, some slick inside move. And if that doesn't work, that's really it. He'll try maybe, a cross arm chop or, maybe he'll throw a spin move in there, but they're not very good. So at the end of the day, Samson Ebukam, I'm not going to trash him, but he's just not he wasn't an impact player for the Rams. He had a few monstrous games, but maybe the 49ers can get something out of him. I don't know personally. But I can understand what they might see in adding him. I can't understand necessarily paying him around $6 million per year. That seemed way too rich for my blood. In regards to Samson Ebukam.
Yeah, I mean, that number would have made sense for me if they had offered him that contract after the Super Bowl season, based on how he played then. But there was a significant drop off from him. And yeah, kind of like you mentioned, it did seem that something was off with him, that he was either playing out of position or he just kind of got lost in the mix. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but he just really drastically kind of fell off. And you saw that the Rams recognized that as well, because they kind of slowly worked him out of their game plan last season, and he wasn't playing very much. So yeah, not surprising that we lost him. But we'll see how he does in San Francisco. We'll see him twice a year. This next guy hurts because I really liked this guy. I felt that he was really underrated with the Rams, but it makes sense that he left, and he's going to, I think, get a lot more playing time with the Panthers, and that is defensive end Morgan Fox, who now is a Carolina Panther. And Jake, this was not surprising to me that we lost him. I really like him. I think he's a great player. I think that, when he was with the Rams, we had some obvious guys who played ahead of him, and I just don't think he got the playing time that he deserved and could have gotten. And I think he's going to get that with Carolina. And we'll see, because Morgan Fox has never really had an opportunity to start. He's never really had an opportunity to get a ton of playing time. So Jake, what do you think he's going to do with the Carolina Panthers?
Well, I like him with Matt Rule's team. They went out, they got Hassan Reddick in the offseason, so I don't necessarily think he'll be a starter. I think he's kind of in a similar role, but just lesser bodies in front of him. And I think this is somebody that has versatility to play as a 4-3 defensive end, 3-4 outside linebacker. Rams used him as a 3-4 defensive end, used him more as a 5 tech. And when I look at, Morgan Fox, it's just so impressive. And it kind of goes to show you, why the Rams didn't bring him back, is the fact that they continue to find these guys in undrafted rookie free agency, this guy at Colorado State Pueblo, and they turn them into these types of guys where it's like you're sad to see a UDFA in his 5th year in the league leave. And that's on them. That is them developing talent. Go back to Corey Littleton, go back to Rodney McLeod. They do it all the while. And, I think there's another guy that's waiting in the wings in Eric Banks from University of Texas, San Antonio, who's on this roster and has familiarity with the defensive line coach, Eric Henderson. So, I look at that and I think, with Morgan Fox, it's going to be tough to see him go because, he really carved out a nice role and, allowed a guy like Donald to get a breather and come in and not be a major drop off. So, I do think that stings, but I think there's a reason they let him go. And for that reason, I think it's because they have a guy that they're trying to turn into that in Eric Banks.
Yeah. And this next guy's was a surprising loss for me as well, because I was under the belief that the Rams wanted him back, which I could be wrong about. I don't think by any means they didn't want him back. But I'm talking about center Austin Blythe, who signed a deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're going to talk about this later in the episode, but this loss particularly hurts because that leaves kind of this gap at the center position for the Rams and the offensive line, which we'll talk about later. But Austin is I think he started off as a very underrated guy. And I think he obviously showed everyone what he can do. I mean, he was drafted in the 7th round by the Indianapolis Colts, I believe, in 2016, 2017. And then he got waived by the Colts and the Rams picked him up. And I think he turned into a really solid player. I would say by the end of his tenure with the Rams, I felt like he was one of the more consistent guys on that offensive line, especially because the offensive line sort of went through some struggles with the Rams, I'd say last season and at times this season. But now he's a Kansas City Chief, which obviously is good for them, not only because of Austin Blythe, but the Chiefs also have had really bad offensive line struggles as well. So it's not surprising that that's where he went. But what are your thoughts on losing Blythe, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I was really upset. I didn't like the move, like the fact that they were literally like it was a staring contest between them and the Chiefs blinked first and just grabbed him. And I just, when you look at him signing for around the veteran minimum, what were the Rams thinking? Like, oh, well, those extra $25,000, that's really going to break the bank. Like, I don't know. It just seemed ridiculous to me. Now you don't have your starting center. You have Coleman, Shelton, and Brian Allen. Brian Allen's a bust in the 4th round. I didn't like that pick anyway, out of Michigan State. And Coleman Shelton isn't even 300 pounds. So I don't really know what they were doing there, unless they look at, another guy that they got by the name of Austin Corbett, unless they see him kicking in at center. I think guard is his best position, but he can obviously play center. I just don't really understand that, but I do think, there are players out there. Austin Reeder, who ironically enough is leaving the Chiefs, arguably had a better year than Austin Blythe. He didn't allow a sack last year, and he's available, 29 years old. The Rams could go out and get him. I mentioned Corbett. Then you have Brian Allen and Coleman Shelton, who I'd pretty much rather have anybody else at center. And then you have Ben Garland, who is a free agent who played really well for the San Francisco 49ers in relief for Weston Richburg last year. So, I mean, there are still options. It feels really bleak, but I guess, are the Rams planning on doing anything the rest of free agency? It seemed like they really just wanted to sign Deshaun Jackson for whatever reason, and that was it. Their entire priority was Leonard Floyd, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but I don't really know what they're doing, to be honest, letting a guy like Austin Blythe go. Yeah. I mean, he's not a superstar, right? But he doesn't have to be. And when you have a guy like Matthew Stafford, you don't need an all-pro center. You just need a guy that can block, can give you help in pass protection, and can help you in the run game. And that's what Blythe can do. He's not an all-world center, but, he's top 15 in the league. And, being on a top team, when you have a really good offensive line, they were number 10. They were top 10 in the league last year, according to PFF. 2019, they were bad. 2018, they were the best in the league. So, I mean, they're not that far away from being the best offensive, that far away from the year they were the best offensive line in the league. So just to kind of see a guy like that go that you got for literally pennies, I don't understand it. I really don't.
Well, it was confusing because he was really the only kind of true center figure that the Rams had. And not only was he that, he was also, pretty decent. So I do think it's very shocking that the Rams allowed him to get away. And I was going to bring this up later, but since you kind of ran over the center options, I'll bring it up now. I wonder if this means that the Rams are looking to fulfill this center position in the draft. And there's a guy by the name of Creed Humphrey who should be a first-round pick, but it's looking like he's going to fall to the 2nd round. I'm wondering if the Rams are going to be able to grab him or maybe someone else in the draft, because at this point, I'm not satisfied with those options that you listed. who we already have. And then those free agents, unless it's Austin Reeder, there's really none of them to me that seem like an upgrade over Austin Blythe. And it doesn't look like to me that the Rams are going to be going after anyone else in free agency this year, but I could be wrong. But moving on, this is probably the most controversial loss of the Rams offseason, and not so much because of the player we lost, but because of where he went. And that is tight end Gerald Everett, who signed a deal with the Seattle Seahawks. It's slipping my mind how long that deal was for. I believe it's a 2-year deal.
I think it's 1 year, $7 million.
1 year. Yeah. So a 1-year deal with the Seattle Seahawks. And listen, I know you did as well, figured we were going to lose Everett. We had Higbee, and then we drafted Hopkins last season, and Gerald Everett, quite frankly, he was pretty strong and pretty consistent when he first started with the Rams. He did fall off a little bit, but then it seemed a little bit like last season that McVay was finding ways to work him in, but it didn't seem that the Rams had any interest in bringing him back, which ended up being the case. And he goes to Seattle, which hurts a little bit because it's obviously one of our division rivals. But Jake, I'm going to be honest, it makes sense to me. The fit there makes sense to me. That was a position that Seattle needed to beef up. And obviously it's a team that has a lot of experience going against Everett and knows him well because they're in our division. So while it's a little infuriating that he's staying in the division, I can't say that I necessarily hate the pick from an unbiased free agency standpoint. I mean, it makes sense to me. What are your thoughts on it?
Oh, it's a perfect fit. And if, you are looking in fantasy and looking at, picking a tight end, and you're looking at the league and thinking, wow, there's like no good tight end options after Kittle, Kelsey, and Waller, somebody like him, I honestly think he has a chance to be really good. And the reason for that is because he has the familiarity factor. I don't know if you brought him up or not. I might have missed it, but Shane Waldron is going from the Rams as the original tight ends coach to the passing game coordinator. He is leaving the Rams to go to Seattle and be their OC. So this is a guy that's worked with Everett since day one of him being a Ram. I think that he is, and also he's got the best quarterback in the division in Russell Wilson. As much as I love Stafford, he's one of my absolute favorite players, and he is a top 7 quarterback for me. But Russell Wilson still exists there, and so you give now Russell Wilson, Gerald Everett to go with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Gerald Everett is essentially replacing the loss of David Moore, who's a very underrated slot receiver. I really like the fit, and I won't be surprised if Gerald Everett ends up having a really huge year in Seattle.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting as well. Like I said, I think it's a really great fit. I understand people are upset about it because it's in our division, but it happens. It's not entirely surprising, like you said, because of those connections there. So we will see him twice a year. And that'll be interesting. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I expect him to have a great season with Seattle. Now, the next guy I'm going to mention is another one that everyone kind of figured we were going to lose this offseason, and that's wide receiver Josh Reynolds, who signed a deal with the Tennessee Titans, which was a little bit surprising to me because there was actually quite a bit of interest in Josh Reynolds during free agency. I didn't really pay much attention to the Titans, but they are the ones who ended up signing him. And Jake, I think Josh is a really good wide receiver who didn't get enough credit with the Rams. I think he started to last season. I think people started to really see what he could do. And it was just one of those things where we had Woods, we had Kupp, and then, we drafted Van Jefferson, which kind of inevitably meant that Josh Reynolds was going to be put on the back burner and squeezed out. But Jake, what are your thoughts on him signing with the Titans, and how do you think he's going to fit in over there?
Well, they're bringing him in there to replace Corey Davis, who really came on strong and was signed by the Jets. And I don't think he's the receiver Corey Davis is, but I get it. Now, I've been seeing that the Titans got this 50-50 ball guy. I just can't agree with that. I think the biggest issue with Josh Reynolds is that he's essentially this 6'3", 189-pound receiver that literally plays like he's Robert Woods. in that, or Cooper Kupp, in that he likes to take quick slants, bubble screens, what have you, and like move with the football. He doesn't go up there and pluck the ball out of the air. And the one throw last year to him, the big deep throw that everyone was talking about against the 49ers to go down by 8 with, I think there's about 4 minutes left in the game. It was like he mistimed his jump. I know everyone like raved about him as a deep ball guy, with Texas A&M, but like when he came to the NFL, that didn't translate. So I don't know. A lot of Tennessee fans seem to think they're getting something that isn't there. Unless he, finds that, who knows? But I don't know. I think that it's hard because it's like I want to appreciate him. And at the same time, I feel like he held back Van Jefferson in his rookie season. And I feel like going back, and I just watched the film because I'm making a Van Jefferson video for my channel. I just watched the film, and all I could think is, Reynolds is good, but Reynolds is a 3, and he's not even really a 2. He's just a 3. Like, you plug him in there, he can make plays. He's still going to have a concentration drop every now and then. He doesn't have explosive athleticism. He's not really great in any area. He's just well-rounded. But then I watched Van Jefferson, and I'm like, this guy's suddenness is off the charts. And just the fact, like, he's such a better route runner than Josh Reynolds. And he's a better ball tracker than Josh Reynolds, and he runs faster than Reynolds. So I was thinking, as I'm watching the film, it's like I'm trying to not hate on Reynolds because I appreciate him for filling in 2018 for Cooper Kupp. But, and just the myriad of times he's filled in. He filled in for Robert Woods in 2017, filled in for Cooks last year. So, like, he's been that guy. But last year, or 2019, last year when he, kind of was, he was getting all that hype as the third guy, and they were legitimately 3 deep. I kept thinking to myself, you drafted Van Jefferson in the second round. You know what this guy can do. After watching all sorts of Van Jefferson film, not just from the Rams, from the Florida Gators as well, the reason he never went over 1,000 yards in college is because, well, he was also on the same team as Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney and Freddie Swain. But on top of that, his quarterback, Felipe Franks, just wanted to tuck and run it 20, 30 times a game. And then Kyle Trask didn't come in until the end of the year, and they would literally never utilize him until like the end when they needed to move the chains, and Van Jefferson was Mr. Reliable. So looking at Josh Reynolds, I think he'll be good for the Titans. I don't think he's going to be anything they didn't have with Davis. He's definitely a downgrade from Corey Davis. And I think Van Jefferson is a much better long-term receiver than Reynolds. I felt like he was better the day he got drafted. So we'll see. But I don't think any Rams fans should feel upset that Reynolds is gone. I think they should appreciate what he did as a guy that came in, played his role. He didn't really complain. 4th round pick that never really got a chance to be the true starter. There was always 2 guys in front of him. And there was always 3 guys in front of him, if you're being real. So, I give him credit for that because I'm sure that wasn't an easy situation. But I'm not going to sit here and act like it's a huge loss because, I think Van Jefferson is a better receiver.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I'm much more interested in Van Jefferson and what he can do than I was in keeping Josh Reynolds. And I think that most Rams fans, and obviously the Rams, felt that way as well. Now, the last guy that I'm going to mention as far as a free agent loss was somewhat surprising, but also not really, because I really wasn't sure if we would retain this guy or not. I felt like it was pretty up in the air, but that's running back Malcolm Brown, who signed a deal with the Miami Dolphins. And Malcolm Brown was a pretty important part of that kind of running back by committee that the Rams were trying to do last season. Obviously, there was some injuries between Henderson and Akers, and Malcolm Brown was kind of consistent for us. I felt like he did a good job. However, I'm not entirely surprised to see him go because I think that Miami is going to use him in a bit of a different way than the Rams did, and I think that probably interested him. But Jake, what were your thoughts on losing Malcolm Brown? And then, just out of curiosity, do you think that this opens the door for either one of the other running backs that the Rams had on the practice squad, or do you think they look a little bit maybe in later rounds of the draft for another running back? Because I'm almost thinking that they'll do that, because if you look at who we have right now, we have Henderson and Akers, which they could just do a duo running back thing. But based on what they tried to do last season, it felt like the Rams were really trying to push for that running back by committee. But that could have changed now that we have Matthew Stafford. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of people that are sold on the fact that they're just going to roll with Akers and Henderson, and they have Xavier Jones, who I really like, and they have Raymond Calais, who I really like. But the fact of the matter is that Xavier Jones and Raymond Calais are just like having John Kelly and Justin Davis all over again. An unproven, undrafted rookie free agent with upside and a late round pick with upside. And the last time the Rams had those guys, you saw Todd Gurley go down, Malcolm Brown went down, and they signed C.J. Anderson off the street. Now, the Rams have Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. I think they could be the most explosive duo. I'm one of the most explosive duos in the league, because don't get me wrong, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon are going to be up there for sure. But my biggest concern is that Cam Akers, whether you realize it or not, had multiple injuries in his rookie season. And not just Cam Akers, but Darrell Henderson really hasn't been healthy throughout his career. He had all sorts of issues his rookie year. And then this past year, he had the ankle issue. I mean, they both have had their fair share of injuries, and it's a tough position to play. Running back, you get hit all the time. So if you have two guys that are already showing signs of not necessarily going to be able to make it through a 16-game season, now it's going to be 17 games, I'm going out and I'm getting an Adrian Peterson or a Todd Gurley. I know it sounds crazy. I know there's a lot of people against it, but I would absolutely bring back Todd Gurley if he wanted to come back. Because the fact of the matter is that when you have 17 games now on the season, you have two running backs that have been hurt, and you have no experience in the back end. I think 100% Stafford as a quarterback that's only had 1,200 yard in a game, 1,200 yard rushers in his career, he's going to want to have that consistency in the backfield. You have Adrian Peterson, who was his running back last year. You go back, you watch the film, Peterson still has it. The way people talk about Frank Gore, like, Peterson's a lot better than Frank Gore. And albeit he's younger, but I feel like Peterson could still run for 1,000 yards if you asked him to. And so looking at this Malcolm Brown thing, I was a little bummed, but I expected it. But I didn't expect it in a sense that the Rams don't have any need for him, because I do think the Rams like have a need for that. I just think they felt like he was going to get more than they could handle. When you're a top rushing attack in the league, teams tend to flake, teams tend to really go over to your team, look at what you have, and if they can't run the football, they'll take pieces of your offense. So, they'll try to run the football. And I guess, how I see it is that, Malcolm Brown is somebody where I've said for years, this guy could start on a few teams. And Miami, they could be looking at him to be the guy. The Rams were never going to do that. So I think Adrian Peterson right now would be so cheap. Todd Gurley, even James Conner. Now, the injury factor is the thing that worries me with Conner. I don't know if necessarily he makes sense because he's a little bit younger, and I don't think the Rams are trying to add competition. I think the Rams are literally, if they go out and get a running back, they're trying to add that to the rotation, add some depth and some consistency, and most importantly, add experience. And I think the best fits to me are Peterson and Gurley. Now, I don't think Gurley's realistic because I don't think Gurley would sign with the Rams. And I would honestly not blame him in the slightest, because I wouldn't go back to my former employer who fired me and, decide to work for them again either. So I don't blame him there. And I think when you bring up the draft, Alexis, this draft has some really good talent at running back. At the top of the draft, obviously, people are talking about Najee Harris. They're talking about, ETN and Javonte Williams, but that's not really what intrigues me. The thing that intrigues me, is somewhat in the middle of that draft, where you have guys like Trey Sermon, who I think, he's my third running back in the draft. I compared him to Todd Gurley. Then you Kenneth Gainwell from Memphis. We talked to the Memphis running back coach, Anthony Jones. We know what he's doing over there at Memphis, and we know he's developing serious talent at the running back position. You have Kylan Hill out of Mississippi State. You have Puka Williams out of Kansas, who would be, another just massive weapon. Ran a 4.3. He's 5'8", 175. Could be a really nice jitterbug in that backfield. Khalil Herbert out of Virginia Tech. Jermar Jefferson out of Oregon State. Ramondre Stevenson out of Oklahoma. Chris Evans out of Michigan. There's a lot of running backs in this class. Shane Simpson, a guy that we've talked to from Virginia. There's a lot of running backs in this class where I would not be surprised if the Rams decided, look, we want to get a guy that we feel comfortable with as the number 3. And we're looking at Xavier Jones, and we like his overall upside, and we like Raymond Calais, but we feel like a guy should have more mass on him. And if that's the case, if they want a bigger guy like Malcolm Brown to be, delivering those blows, then it's going to be a guy like, Trey Sermon. I think that's a perfect fit if that's the case. But if it's, if they're looking for a guy that'll be a jitterbug and add, a dynamic to the offense that maybe they don't feel they have, Puka Williams is a no-brainer. I think he could really explode on the scene, and, any offensive-minded coach that is, kind of a freak show and, will do all sorts of things, kind of like a mad scientist, whether it be a Shanahan or a McVay or whoever, he could really shine in an offensive scenario like that. So I guess that's kind of how I look at it. With Malcolm Brown, I think you would want to ideally replace him with Adrian Peterson, because he's going to be cheap. And Peterson, we already know that he said he wants to play for the Rams, is one of the teams he mentioned. Stafford has familiarity with him, and you're just getting a guy that, he doesn't fumble all the time. He's well built, and he's got a ton of experience playing in this league, and not only just playing in this league, but playing it at a high level.
Yeah, I agree. I'm more inclined to bring in Peterson as that third running back than I am to draft somebody, just because of the veteran experience that he has. And I think that that's always important. Henderson and Akers are still relatively young, and I think that having a veteran in the locker room at that position could be really beneficial. And as you mentioned, he is familiar with Matthew Stafford already. So that's something to keep an eye on. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not entirely sure I see the Rams doing anything else in free agency, but if they were, that would be the guy that I would hope that they go for. But the last loss that we have isn't a free agent loss. It is a trade that the Rams made. The Rams traded Michael Brockers to the Lions for a late round pick in 2023. I believe it's a 7th round pick. This really hurt. This hurt from not only a fan perspective. Michael Brockers has been a Ram for a really long time, back to the St. Louis days. I believe he was drafted, and you'll have to correct me after this. I believe he was drafted in what was it, Jake? It was before Aaron Donald was there.
Michael Brockers, I want to say, was drafted 2012. Yeah.
Yeah, 2012.
Maybe even 2011.
And
no, 2012. Because Robert Quinn was 2011. Bradford was 2010, and then Brockers was 2012, and then 13 was Austin and Ogletree, and then Donald was 14 with a man whose name cannot be mentioned on this podcast.
Yeah, well, yeah, losing Michael Brockers really hurt, not only because of that, but because he was still talented. Michael Brockers is still playing at a really high level. He obviously doesn't get as much praise as Aaron Donald, who he was playing next to. I mean, it's impossible when you're playing on a line with Aaron Donald to, be mentioned among him. But, Michael Brockers was still playing really well. And this, to me, was a little bit surprising, especially because it was for a late round pick in 2023. That did not sit right with me. I understand that they really just needed to get out of that contract. And obviously there's familiarity now with the Lions where they've got Brad Holmes over there and Jared Goff is over there. And so I think they worked something out. But it still just felt a little weird to me to give up a player of that caliber for a 7th round pick in 2023. But losing Michael Brockers, it does hurt. I think the Rams think that they're going to be okay in that position. We have guys like Greg Gaines, like Ashawn Robinson, who I believe still has 1 year left on his deal. There's guys, you mentioned Banks earlier. There's guys that I think they think can fill in for Michael Brockers, but if we're being honest, they are not at Michael Brockers' level. They're just not. I'm not going to compare Greg Gaines to Michael Brockers. There's really not a comparison there. It's not equal. It hurts losing him. I did not like this move. I get that the Rams were trying to make cap space. But, Jake, if there's anything I'm missing, feel free to mention it. And just what were your thoughts about this move?
I didn't like the move. I understood the move. You have the emergence of Sebastian Joseph Day, who has really become one of the best nose tackles in football. I cannot believe I'm saying that, but he had a monster season last year. And Ashawn Robinson looked really good when he got healthy towards the end of the year. So I think they just saw those three as the go-to three. My biggest concern here is the law of unintended consequences. So you trade Brockers away and it looks good on the books, right? You see that cap space being saved, all that, but you lose that leadership. And I'll never forget when Steve Weish came on our show and he flat out told us they love Michael Brockers. Don't be surprised if they bring him back. Like, he is loved in that locker room. He is a leader. He's important. And now here he is with the Lions, and I think he's going to be a huge piece for the Lions. I'm of the minority here. I think the Lions are going to be really good this year, or at least really competitive. I don't think that they're tanking. But I think with Brockers, it was one of those like total business decisions, because there's no way that they did not want him to, they didn't want to have to let him go. I think they really needed the cap space because they had to get under the top 51. Essentially what that means is, when you're starting the new NFL season, the top 51 is the top 51 contracts on your books. Once you get under that number, you're good. You can go over the cap after that deadline's hit, but you have to be under that number when the deadline hits in March, because then you see, teams having to go under the cap. Alexis, you probably get it, but the whole point of it is that the top 51 gives you that kind of flexibility. And then September is when you have to be like below the total cap, where it takes the entire effect of the entire roster into play. So, it's really a tough one here, because I love Brockers. I thought he was extremely underrated and undervalued, and I almost wonder if he'll do better in a different role, because he really sacrificed a lot of sacks to be that guy that would take on double teams and, help out the rest of the team. He's a very unselfish player and a true leader. So I think they are missing that. But the Rams also did add somebody, surprisingly, and we didn't really talk too much about it, but they signed Leonard Floyd to a 4-year deal worth $16 million a year. At first I thought it was a little bit of an overpay. But then I really thought about it. I'm like, he's one of the best run defending, edge defenders out there. And on top of that, to boot, he became a really good pass rusher this year. And I would argue he had a better year than Khalil Mack, who he used to start across from. So I understood it, and I'm actually glad he's back. It gave me some clarity, because I'm not very sold on this edge group that's with the Rams. I'm completely off the Terrell Lewis train. I do not think he's going to have a great career in the NFL, because I think he's constantly going to be hurt. I've seen this over and over again. This movie has been shown on every team in every era. It always happens. You have a guy with, enormous upside or a great looking archetype for, his body structure, and it just constantly is getting hurt. I like Justin Hollins a lot, but the fact that they got Leonard Floyd back means to me they just need to add one more piece in the draft. I'm looking at Jordan Smith out of UAB, and then I feel like they'd be really good, probably the best they've been at the edge position.
Yeah, I was really happy that they brought Leonard Floyd back. I really wanted him back. I really like him. I think that having guys like Aaron Donald playing at that defensive tackle position really helps Leonard Floyd. And I think that we saw that last season. He got a lot of good looks, and he made the most of them. And that's really all that you can ask of a guy like that, is to just make the most of his opportunities. And that's what he did. I agree. The number was a little bit high. A 4-year deal seemed also a little bit high to me. But listen, if he plays like he did last season, I have no problem with it. I'm excited to see what he can do, because I think the Rams really believe in him, and I believe in him as well, which, is obviously good from a fan perspective to see a guy you like coming back. So I was really excited about that. But now it's time to talk about the other acquisition that the Rams made this offseason, which is wide receiver Deshaun Jackson. Jake, I don't know what to say about this one. Listen, Mike, I have some concerns here. I think the obvious concern that everyone has is, can he stay healthy, or is he just going to play for 3 games and that's
Why
it?
do you say that, Alexis? I mean, he hasn't missed 29 games over the last 2 years or anything like that, or 3 years.
Right. It just doesn't seem like he's the guy that's going to contribute. I understand why you bring him on, because when he's healthy, he's that deep threat, that vertical threat that the Rams wanted and needed. He is that guy when he's healthy, but he also doesn't stay healthy. He's a veteran. He's no spring chicken. He's, got some years under his belts, but like you mentioned, his record's not great when it comes to staying healthy and being on the field. So it is a little bit concerning. There were other guys you and I obviously mentioned that we would have preferred. Obviously, we can't judge this move too hard. I don't want to judge this guy too hard before the season even starts, but just based off his history, I'm not super impressed. It's not someone that I was really wanting on the team. It didn't excite me. But what are your thoughts on Deshaun Jackson? I feel like they're pretty similar to mine because we've talked about this, but I want to know if you think he is going to contribute, and if he stays healthy, what that's going to look like for the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, look, if he stays healthy, the Rams are clearly going to be the best offense in all of football, because then you have 4 legit starting wide receivers on this roster. And then you have Matthew Stafford, who isn't limited at all. So, I mean, I guess the thing here with Deshaun Jackson, I mean, it's always been about health. To me, I think the best ability is availability. So that's why I didn't want to sign him. But I mean, Deshaun Jackson, it's crazy to say this, but he's the greatest deep threat over the last 10 years and maybe 15 years the NFL has seen. He's first in literally every category. And I understand that's why they brought him. Plus, you factor in the familiarity he has with Sean McVay, coaching him with the, at the time, the Redskins. Don't cancel me. Now they're Washington Football. But, I think if he stays healthy, the Rams are going to be lethal. And if he gets hurt, they have Van Jefferson. And I think that's a win. And it wasn't too much. I think it was $3.5 million with incentives. It can go up to like 6 or something like that. I hope he hits the incentives, because that means it would be a huge year. I mean, if Deshaun Jackson stays healthy, big if, but if he does, I think he's going over 10 touchdowns, to be honest with you. That speed, albeit he's 34 years old, it shouldn't be the case, but that speed will still beat any secondary over the top. He's got just ridiculous speed. If he keeps himself in shape and doesn't get he doesn't get hurt, I mean, the Rams have a bargain here. But I was a little bummed because I wanted the Rams to go after. Well, when I saw Juju Smith-Schuster's price go down, I was considering him. But I really thought if they were going to get anybody, in this free agency class, I felt as though Corey Davis would have been the best option. But obviously Corey Davis was, too much at that point. So, I wasn't surprised that they moved on from that, and they were never really in that. And then Marvin Jones as well. I really wanted Marvin Jones and Matthew Stafford again, but I think the biggest thing here that we need to realize is Matthew Stafford has been playing with all sorts of players for years. He had Reggie Bush, he had Adrian Peterson, he's had all sorts of guys: Golden Tate, Calvin Johnson, Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola. I think that's the thing that makes Stafford so good, is that you don't need him to have his own buddies. He's going to go out there and he's going to win you football games, and he's going to do it with anybody because that's what he does. He makes guys like Quintez Cephas look good. I'm not saying Quintez Cephas is bad, but in his rookie year, he didn't look bad. Stafford put the ball where it needed to be, and Danny Amendola as well. I mean, I won't be surprised if he gets another contract because Stafford really put the ball where it needed to be. And I just think, to me, and I say this and people laugh, but Tristan Jackson, Simba Webster, and J.J. Koski could have good seasons as long as Stafford's throwing the ball all 17 games. So that's kind of where I'm at on that, is that, you're just giving Stafford another weapon, and you're giving him a weapon, speed that they don't actively have on the roster. So I'm just overly, impressed with, their focus on the offense. I feel like guys like Tyler Higbee and Bryson Hopkins are totally getting left out. People aren't thinking about them, but don't worry, they will get they'll get plenty of action. And I'm excited to see this team. I don't think that they'll run the 12 personnel as much that some people think. I think that they're going to go to more of an offense that we really haven't seen. And I think then we're really going to see how much Jared Goff was not holding back the offense, but limiting the offense in a sense, because holding back kind of feels to me like you're not giving him credit even when he's out there playing well, but limiting is a better word, because limiting is essentially, he wasn't making, the deep throw. They were still top 10 in explosive plays, any play above 20 yards. And that's to say a lot, because they were pretty much dinking and dunking with Goff. Whereas now you have a guy that can throw all over the field. It opens up all sorts of things, not only for the run game, but different receivers. You're not going to see double teams. And I think Deshaun Jackson, just having that deep threat, or rather a field stretcher, it's going to do exactly what it did with Brandon Cooks. People are going to have to respect that deep ball. And when they go to, maybe put another man out there, they can no longer double team. They can't bring a safety up, in the box. They're going to have both safeties back. They're going to have to play cover too. They're going to have to test, because Deshaun Jackson will make you pay. That speed, as long as he's on the field, he's a threat. As soon as he comes off it, he's just like everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. And if he can stay healthy,
it's a big if.
Of course. It's a big if. That's the thing. I don't want to diss the guy before the season even starts. And obviously injuries aren't his fault. So, I'm not trying to make it sound like that, but it is a little concerning. You do have to take that into account when you sign a player. It's something that's obviously haunted him his whole career, and we'll see. But I do expect the Rams to really only use him in situations where he's going to be a deep threat. I don't think that he is going to be used as often as people think. I've been saying that in my mind, Van Jefferson is wide receiver 3 and Deshaun Jackson is wide receiver 4. I really believe that. I think they brought Deshaun Jackson in for a very specific purpose, and that is to be the deep vertical threat. I don't think that they're really going to use him for much else, but we will see about that. But overall, Jake, I think this Rams offseason has been a little lackluster compared to what we've seen in the past. I think, if anything, the overriding story here is more about who the Rams lost than who we brought in, because we really didn't bring in really anyone other than Deshaun Jackson, big name wise, compared to the off seasons that the Rams have had in the past, making huge trades and huge free agent signings and things like that. But I think that the Rams feel confident in the team that they have now. And obviously, like every team, they have a plan for the draft. We don't know entirely what that is. I know you and I will do an episode where we speculate about that. But I think just based on what I've seen and heard, the Rams feel comfortable with what they have so far. I don't think that they were able to do everything that they wanted to do. And honestly, for all the people that are like, oh, the salary cap is a myth, it's a lie, whatever, we did see this offseason that it did hold the Rams back. I mean, people can say that it didn't, but there were a lot of moves that the Rams were forced to make, such as, trading Michael Brockers, and a lot of moves that the Rams weren't able to make, such as some of those free agent signings we know that they were targeting, but they ended up losing out because that player demanded more money and was able to get more elsewhere. So I do think that money ended up catching up with the Rams a little bit this offseason. And I think we saw that with kind of a lackluster free agency signings that we've seen from them, other than grabbing Deshaun Jackson. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but in my opinion, I do think that the money was tight, and we saw that.
It was definitely tight. I mean, this is what happens when you cut ties with a quarterback you just gave over $100 million to. You gave not only guaranteed money, but then you restructured his deal the season before. So basically what that does, you're kicking the can down the road and you're making it so you're guaranteeing more money. That money is now gone, therefore it's dead money. You're not getting that money back. So they actually made that, they actually made that a bigger cap hit than what it would have been, because they saved about $13 or $14 million when they actually restructured Goff last season. A lot of people forget that. Then you have Todd Gurley. You have $8 million in dead money for him. Then you have dead money for Leonard Floyd because he hit his incentive goal, so they lose $3 million there. So yeah, I mean, there's dead money across the board. They got restructures done, but they literally had to restructure all of their top guys just to make it under the cap. It kind of shows you how close they cut it. But hey, that's how that works. Leonard Floyd is going to have around a $5 million cap hit in 2021, which is just insane. So I mean, there's ways to work around it. That's what people mean when they say the cap is a myth, because you can do things like that and you can kind of cheat the system. One thing I will say that we didn't really discuss yet, we talked a little bit about it because, Troy Hill and the Rams having interest in him, but we didn't really discuss the cornerback position and, kind of how you and I both see it, because I look at it as I'm not okay with David Long being the third guy. I would rather start Terrell Burgess at nickel if that was the case. And I'm somebody that is pro Burgess over Rapp any day of the week at safety. But that's the point I'm at, is where I didn't like the pick when it was made. I know David Long is a California boy, so I know there are a lot of fans that like him for that reason. But for me, I watched him at Michigan and I just felt like he was kind of just a guy. And sure enough, I mean, he hasn't played in a ton of snaps, but when he's been out there, he's stuck out like a sore thumb, because you look at the way Troy Hill's played, you look at Darius Williams, you look at Jalen Ramsey, and then they throw him in and you would know he was in. And so I feel the Rams do need another corner, and I don't know if they'll look in the draft. They've actually met now twice with Asante Samuel Jr., the son of Asante Samuel, who was the famous cornerback for the New England Patriots. I love Asante Samuel Jr. I actually did a way too early mock draft for 2021, early after the draft last year, and I had Asante Samuel Jr. going to the Rams with that 57th pick. In the draft. I didn't actually pick 57, but I had them in the second round. So that would be interesting if they ended up getting him. And I also had Amon-Ra St. Brown in the third round. So that would also be interesting if I got those two right a year apart. But I guess the point here is that the Rams are meeting with corners, and I'm just curious if they, are even looking at the free agency market, because you saw the story with Jalen Ramsey, basically saying, he wanted the Rams to go after Corn Elder, who is a slot corner, former third round pick out of Miami. I liked him a lot in that draft, and he played well with the Panthers, really started bringing his career around, but now he's a free agent. And I think it would be a solid addition, but I think the best addition out there if you've been following my stuff, just anybody that's listening to this, I've been all over Brian Poole. He has familiarity with the current defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, played with the Falcons from 2016 to 2018. Morris came over in 2015. And he went over the Jets, and every single year, Brian Poole has gotten better. He's more filled out than Corn Elder. Elder's more of a scrawny corner, moves well, but Brian Poole, I think, is a better all-around player. He's 28 years old, so he's not super old. He's still fast, around a 4.49, 4.5, 40 time. But more importantly, he's quick to react. He's physical, can play the boundary, or can play slot corner. And he was rated a top 10 corner by PFF in cornerbacks that had at least 20% of snaps or more. And I feel, to me, like he's the best option here. And I feel like the Rams in the past, they've waited. They went and got Clay Matthews very late in their free agency, and he didn't impact their compensatory pick formula. And they waited very, very late in 2018 when they got Nickel Roby-Coleman, or 2017. So I'm curious to see if they're doing something like that, because we're now in like wave 4 of free agency, which is like there shouldn't be anything out there, but you still have a quality center, maybe a top 12 center in Austin Reeder. You still have Brian Poole, who, like I said, was a top 10 corner according to PFF. So you still have guys out there. So it'll be intriguing. I think that's the best course of action, if you ask me. I think the Rams should, pick up a guy, make sure you have that veteran presence in Brian Poole, and then, in free agency or not free agency, in the draft, if you fall in love with the draft pick, go ahead and pull the trigger, but I feel like they at least need to fill, because I'm a big proponent of going into free agency to fill holes and then using the draft to add depth. Because if you draft like that, you're going to end up with better players. You may have more needs or so to speak, but you're you're going to have better players. And so keep in mind, if you don't draft for need, you don't get guys like Aaron Donald, you don't get Michael Brockers, you don't get Robert Quinn. There were other needs according to other people at the time. So I feel like drafting need is not the biggest way to go. I think drafting best available is the way to go. And the way you do that is by filling your holes in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more inclined as well to try and bring in a veteran corner. I think even if we do, I would like to see them target someone in the draft as well. I do think we're thin in that position. And I honestly think we're a little bit thin in general in our secondary. Losing John Johnson. I understand that we have Rapp, Burgess, and Fuller in that safety position. Nick Scott, I think, is on the practice squad still, but I do think that we're a little bit thin back there. I'm not entirely too worried about it. I think the corner position, obviously, we have Jalen Ramsey and then Darius Williams, I think, is the 1 and 2 guys there, but we do need to bring in somebody else. I'm okay with whoever. I'm not entirely familiar with the options that you mentioned. I know who they are. I can't recall seeing them play, but I just agree that we need to bring somebody else in there, just depth wise. I mean, also you mentioned David Long. I'm not a huge fan as well. He hasn't played a lot though. I'll give him that. He hasn't played a lot in the NFL, but based on what we've seen from him, I'm not convinced that he's a starter. Or really even a solid backup. I think if anything, he provides depth, but I'd like to see us bring in somebody else. So we'll see. I think that these are all things that the Rams are thinking about. I think it's obviously something they're going to be thinking about going into the draft. I mean, the date that we're recording this is April 2nd. And so we have about 3 weeks now until the draft. So obviously all the NFL teams are trying to get everything together. I do suspect that the corner position is something that the Rams are going to target. I don't necessarily think it'll be in the second round. I think it's either going to be only in the second round or it's going to be later in the draft. And we're going to do a whole episode about this, so I won't get too much into it, but I don't think that that's their top priority going in the draft. But we'll see. But overall, Rams offseason, that's really it. I mean, there hasn't been as much movement this year.
Oh, they
as
also
there has
signed
been in the
Devlin
past.
Hodges.
Oh yes, who has been on our show, who we really like, and so that's some depth at the quarterback position. But obviously, rolling into next season, we have Matthew Stafford, and we talked about acquiring him, big deal, and then John Wolford, who's going to remain our backup, who we also really like, and then now
Yes.
we have Devlin Hodges, and I believe Bryce Perkins is still on the
Yeah,
team.
I really like their
Practice squad?
quarterbacks all of a sudden. I've never really liked their quarterback room because I feel like they get the most bland quarterbacks like Sean Mannion's of the world. But now I feel like I love their quarterback room, like to the point where, if the Rams don't bring back Stafford after the 2 seasons, I'm curious to see where John Wolford is with his development. Because, I mean, if you're in that system for that many years, I wouldn't ever rule it past the Rams to give a guy an opportunity like that. So, I think the thing I'm really interested in that some people, I mean, this is a very hit or miss thing. Some people agree, some people don't. I don't know where you are on this, but I have a feeling you're with me. I think that, looking at this defense, the one thing that this defense has missed, and I don't know if they've ever had, is a true sideline to sideline next gen athletic linebacker. And there are quite a few in this draft. And I look at Dylan Moses from Alabama. He's somebody I love. I look at Jabril Cox, who is a North Dakota State transfer to LSU. And I look at, somebody along the lines of Cameron McGrone from Michigan. There are some really, really good linebackers in this draft. Are you looking at a linebacker that can be the number one guy? Are you okay with just a rotation, nobody being a number one guy, and just doing kind of what Staley did last year?
No, I'm looking at someone who could be that number one guy. I mean, I really like, and this is a little bit old school now, but I really like having a true inside linebacker.
It shouldn't be old school, though. You know what I mean?
Well, it shouldn't be, but now it is, because now you're looking at these teams kind of doing that mix and match type of stuff. And I really miss having the true kind of like, Rams fans will remember, like a James Laurinaitis, someone dominating the middle. And the Rams are weak, in my opinion, in the inside linebacker position right now. I do think that we need to take a guy who can be that type of guy. I mean, the obvious, if you start to get into second round, because we obviously don't have a first round pick, I like Dylan Moses as well.
He'd be my pick at 57, like tomorrow, the way it stands.
Yeah.
So
if he's there, I like him. I like Chaz Surratt, who I think can be that guy out of North Carolina.
I liked him, and then I saw his 40 time, and I'm like, he's slow. I had no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see his time.
4.7.
But I mean, I could see what. Yeah, I mean, but I do like him, and he's someone I watch film on. I think that he'll be there. Some people think Nick Bolton out of Missouri could be on the inside, but I actually don't. I don't see that either. I think he's more of an outside.
Late first, early second. I don't even think he'll be there. I think he'll be gone. I think Zaven Collins, kiss your dreams goodbye if you think Zaven Collins has fallen that far. Like he's right. Going, I think first, maybe top 20, I'd say. McGrone, though, is somebody that I think is being slept on. And you're the one that first brought him up to me. So I watched his film.
I like him.
And I feel like this guy takes the best angles of any inside linebacker in the draft.
Yeah, I really like him. And he actually, when I look at what other people are projecting him for, a lot of people have him going early third, which I think is late for him. So I think he'll be there at 57. And if he's there, it depends on who else is there as well. I mean, if Dylan Moses is there, I think I prefer him. But, if McGrone is there and some of the other guys are gone, I think it's worth taking him at 57. I think he's that good. But we'll see. And we'll talk about this more when we do our drafts episodes. But yeah, I think that this Rams offseason, while it's not the most exciting, I don't think it's been bad. I mean, it hasn't been like a disaster of an offseason, which we've also seen. So we should be grateful about that. I mean, boring is better than bad. As simple as that statement is. I think that it hasn't been the most exciting offseason, but we'll see. And now, after this episode, we're going to turn our attention to the draft, and we'll have several episodes about that. That's in 3 weeks. So we want to make sure that we're staying up to date on that. But yeah, that's, I think, going to do it for us for our off-season episode. As always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Downtown Rams. You can follow me on Twitter at the Alexis Craft. That's Craft with a K. You can follow Jake at JKBoganDTSN. We will be back soon starting our draft coverage. We'll have a few episodes out about the draft, covering all things Rams drafts, and we're not too far away. 3 weeks. It seems like a long time, but it's really not. So we'll be back soon, but until then, take care, guys, and go Rams. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code DTR at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and make sure to use code DTR. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.